Good morning. We're going to lead off today with news of a deadly stampede among mourners in Iran. As Iranian leaders make new threats to avenge Qassem Soleimani's death, there are reports of people killed and injured at his funeral this morning. These are images coming in from Iranian state television showing the burial procession for Soleimani, the top general who was targeted and killed last week in a U.S. airstrike ordered by Donald Trump. State TV is reporting a stampede among that burial procession this morning. We have no verified video yet to show what exactly has happened, but we've just now had an update from state TV reporting at least 32 people have been killed and another 190 hurt. There is no word yet on the cause for the stampede. This is another day of public, heated emotion in Iran, with the funeral crowds chanting for revenge and the leader of Iran's Revolutionary Guard bringing shouts from mourners with a vow to set U.S. interests ablaze. Again this morning, we begin our coverage with Rebecca Collard in Beirut. And let us begin with these new threats from Iran this morning, Rebecca, an extraordinary demand from the country's supreme leader.
Yeah, Heather, I think let's talk. Yeah, let's start there with what we're hearing from the leadership in Iran. Two interesting things this morning. First of all, these comments from top military commanders saying that there are 13 ways in which Iran, could respond to the U.S. And we don't have details about that, but we've been talking in the last few days, Heather, on this program about how Iran might respond and whether that's going to be Iran responding itself or whether it's going to use one of the militia groups. But it sounds like he's making it clear that Iran is planning on responding. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, Heather, after these 3 days of mourning come to an end, as Qassem Soleimani's body is buried in this massive funeral procession in Kerman, his hometown, whether or not then we're going to see some action from Iran. And second of all, Heather, this a session by Iran's parliament where, the lawmakers are shouting death to America, and they're passing this bill, which they're calling triple urgency, saying that Iran needs to find a way to respond to the U.S. for this brazen attack against the country's top military commander. So again, threats this morning, as you said, Heather, from the country's political leadership.
Rebecca, come back to the point, if you would, that you just made, and we're going to look live at these pictures again in Soleimani's hometown of Kerman. Similar, not quite as many people, obviously, but similar looking to what we saw and what we talked about yesterday together after that incredible march in Tehran. We're seeing scenes we have not seen for a long time. Hundreds of thousands of Iranian people out in the streets, seemingly united, seemingly very high emotion there. I mean, what are the analysts, what are the experts saying? What do we see in these images? What do we understand about where the Iranian people are right now?
Yeah, Heather, I think that's an excellent question. And, it's really difficult to know without being able to be on the ground talking to these mourners themselves about why they're there, whether this is about Qassem Soleimani. And I think we know that for many people in Iran who may be galvanized by this moment, it is not about Qassem Soleimani. He is not a figure that was loved by all Iranians. He's not a figure that was loved by people all over the Middle East because of his role in supporting so many militias and his role in extending Iran's reach. But I do think there's this galvanizing moment, and I think you see it even in the face of these people. You have this mix, Heather, of mourning where people are crying, and at the same time this anger. And I think this anger comes from two places. And having talked to people over the last few days, and also just looking at what Iranians are saying online, I think there's this sense for people, Heather, who do not support the regime in Iran. And we had late last year this wave of protests against the regime. I think there's two things that are angering them. First of all, the brazenness of this attack, that the U.S. believes they can just kill a top military commander on foreign soil, and that there's no repercussions for that. And I think the second thing is fear, Heather, about what this is going to bring for Iranian people and for people in the region. Because let's be honest, any conflict that comes out of these Iran-U.S. tensions are going to impact civilians here in the Middle East much more than they're going to impact Americans. So I do think that there is a rally around the flag or a galvanizing moment for Iran. And I think that if Trump thought this was going to, I don't know what the objectives were of Trump when he carried this out, but I don't think this is what he was looking for, Heather.
Okay, so we will see from the Iranian leaders whether they use this galvanized public show to drive them on as they make their next courses of action. But there's no doubt we're hearing, as we've said, new and renewed threats this morning. In response to those, Rebecca, the United States taking new steps to heighten security across the region. So what are the details on that?
Yeah, actually, a couple of interesting things just in the last couple of hours here. First of all, just now, in the last half an hour or so, we're seeing reports that there is the U.S. is saying there's a renewed naval threat to ships in the Gulf. So, there was a lot of attacks over the last few months on naval ships, on oil-related facilities in the Gulf area. And so the U.S. is heightening the warning about that again. And the second thing is its embassy, especially its embassy in Baghdad, which, of course, was the site of mass protests after those first strikes were carried out by the U.S., but also has been hit by rockets or the area around the embassy, I should say, has been hit by rockets over the last few days, this fortified green zone. And if you look at the U.S. embassy, we're not talking about an embassy, Heather. We're talking about a massive compound. And we know that that facility is on high alert. And, of course, this comes off the back of these kind of mixed reports yesterday, Heather, about whether or not the U.S. was going to leave. And, we talked about this yesterday also, Iraqi lawmakers passing this resolution that the U.S. forces should leave. And then this confusion yesterday by this leaked letter that seemed to imply that the U.S. was pulling its forces out of Iraq. And then we had U.S. defense officials saying, no, that's not the case. So in that environment, and because of these various attacks against U.S.-related targets in Iraq, we see this heightened level of security this morning, Heather.
Rebecca, thank you for all of that this morning, continuing to watch the story and the region very closely for us. Rebecca Collard, who was in Beirut this morning.